My mother was the most beautiful woman I ever saw. All I am, I owe to my mother. I attribute my success in life to the moral, intellectual, and physical education I received from her. Can you guess who this quote is about? Let me give you guys a hint. It is, I don't know if you can see it, but it is from George Washington. I didn't have a really official $8, but I had a picture of him. This speech is about George Washington. Specific purpose statement. My speech will inform my fellow classmates about George Washington's background and importance in U.S. history. George Washington's three major roles was he was a leader during the American Revolution, a general and commander to a chief and colonist, one of the founding fathers and the first president of the United States of America. Credibility statements. This information is part of our country's history and can be verified by such as the National Constitution Center and the History.com website. The United States was born and required a great leader. George Washington began his successful presidency on April 30th, 1789. As citizen and resident of the United States, we should be able to explain our country's history. Traditional sentence. Now that you know that my speech is about, I will move on and discuss point one. A brief insight into Washington's life. He was one of 8 children to Augustine's and mother. Mary Ball, his father, died when George was only 11 years old. Since he was no parental figure, he admired his older half-brother, Lawrence Washington. Lawrence influence on George at a very young age and encouraged him to join the Royal Navy. However, his mother did not allow him to do so. George Washington had a limited education because of his family's financial situation. George was a land surveyor as a young man. He began to serve as a commander-in-chief of the Continental Army in June 17 of 1775. Transition sentence. I have finished point to one. Coming up next point. In 1789, the first presidential election took place in the United States. George Washington was a popular candidate, and the time was contributed to his popularity. He had been a war hero, he had fought in the American Revolution, and proven to be a great leader. He led the colonists to a victory over Great Britain's army, which resulted in his election as president April 30th, 1789. John Adams was elected vice president. Now, why is this important? Well, he was the first elected president who was leading a newborn country. He had to set the example for upcoming president, and he himself did not have an example to follow. He was able to choose the members of his own cabinet wisely. He selected 4 members: Thomas Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton, Henry Knox, and Edmund Randolph. Washington had the privilege to nominate the first Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, John Jay. All men selected were significant because they helped the president carry out neat functions during this presidency. As a new nation, the United States had proved they would be independent from Great Britain. Washington put Alexander Hamilton in charge of the financial crisis the country was facing. Hamilton was known the first Secretary of the U.S. Treasury, who helped strengthen the economy. The transition sentence. This is the end of the point and the beginning of point 3. Finally, Washington's first important role when he was unanimously elected to serve as president of the Constitution Convention which took place between the dates of May 27, 1787 and September 17, 1787. The purpose of the convention was for the men to revise the Article of Confederation, but instead they end up creating the new U.S. Constitution, which replaced the Articles. Why is this important to us today? Power was handed to the people. The Constitution separates the government into three branches. The legislative creates the laws, the executive helps execute laws, the judicial interprets the law. All branches became equal on this allows each branch to check on each other, which is known as checks and balance. The US Constitution here the US Constitution separates the government we analyzed the George Washington upbringing and how he had limited education and resources, yet he grew up to be an exemplary man. His service in the American Revolution proved that was a great leader. He served as a president of the Constitution Convention. He helped create the U.S. Constitution. His roles as a leader also led him being elected the first president of the U.S. on April 30, 1789. The conclusion statement is that Washington was a great first president for a newborn nation. He was considered the father of his country because of leadership skills. He helped establish a solid formation for the following president to come.